The diplomatic shuttle landed on Earth with all the grace of a cosmic middle finger. 3 beings emerged, each one looking like they'd been designed by committee to represent the absolute pinnacle of alien superiority complex. First came Commander Vex Thornbeak, whose name pretty much screamed I peaked in military academy. Picture a 7-foot-tall bird that had gotten way too into CrossFit and decided to accessorize with enough metals to set off metal detectors 3 systems away. His feathers gleamed with that particular shade of arrogance that only comes from never having been told no by anyone with functioning opposable thumbs. Next waddled Ambassador Krugg, who looked like someone had asked a mountain what it wanted to be when it grew up, and the mountain had answered bigger. This walking geological survey was roughly the size and shape of a small building, with skin that appeared to have been carved from the same material they used to make parking garages. He moved with the confident swagger of someone who had never met a door frame that could contain him or a chair that could support him. Finally, Dr. Melodia Quillsworth practically bounced out of the shuttle on what could generously be called legs but looked more like enthusiastic pool noodles. She was a writhing mass of tentacles topped with more eyes than strictly necessary, and a smile that suggested someone had just told her the secrets of the universe, and those secrets were hilarious. Her excitement levels appeared to be calibrated for someone who had just discovered that puppies existed and were adorable. They arranged themselves in what was clearly a practiced formation of intimidation outside the newly constructed Earth Reception Center. Vex stood at attention like he was personally holding up the entire galactic military. Krugg crossed arms that looked like they could bench press continents. Melodia simply writhed with barely contained scientific glee. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of Sol 3, Vex announced with the kind of voice that suggested he practiced this speech in the mirror. "We are representatives of the Galactic Council, here to extend our magnanimous offer of membership to your developing species." Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward, representing humanity with the kind of smile that suggested he was either delighted to meet them or not, calculating the precise angle needed to introduce his boot to Vex's perfectly preened posterior. Jake had the weathered look of someone who had spent his career explaining to various authorities why their brilliant plans wouldn't work, usually while standing in the smoking remains of said plans. "How generous of you," Jake replied, his tone so diplomatically neutral, it could have been used to negotiate peace treaties between warring nations of accountants. "And what exactly makes us worthy of such an honor?" Dr. Quillsworth's tentacles practically vibrated with excitement. "Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. Your species shows remarkable potential despite your obvious biological limitations. The Council has decided that even inferior life forms deserve a chance to contribute to galactic civilization." "Inferior?" Jake's eyebrow made a movement that suggested it was considering filing for independence from his face. Krugg's voice rumbled like an avalanche having a conversation with itself. "No offense intended, soft flesh. Your kind simply lacks the advantages we superior species possess. Weak bones, fragile skin, limited sensory input, inefficient organ systems. But the Council believes in charity work." "How thoughtful," Jake said, his smile remaining fixed in place with the kind of determination usually reserved for people trying to assemble furniture without instructions. "I'm sure our biologists will be fascinated to learn about our many shortcomings. Perhaps you'd care to demonstrate these superior advantages you mentioned?" Vex's chest puffed out so far it looked like he was trying to achieve escape velocity. "Gladly. It's important that you understand exactly what you're aspiring to become." The 3 aliens exchanged the kind of look that suggested they were about to put on a show that would be talked about in diplomatic circles for generations, though probably not for the reasons they expected. What followed could only be described as the galaxy's most condescending science fair. If science fairs typically involved beings who clearly believed they had invented the concept of evolution and wanted everyone to know about it. Vex went first, naturally. He spread his wings with the flourish of someone unveiling a masterpiece, revealing a wingspan that could probably provide shade for a small village. "Observe the perfection of my skeletal structure," he announced, launching himself into the air with the grace of a feathered missile. "Hollow bones provide the optimal strength-to-weight ratio, allowing for effortless flight and superior agility." He performed a series of aerial maneuvers that were admittedly impressive. If you enjoyed watching someone show off like they just invented the concept of moving through 3-dimensional space. Loop-de-loops, barrel rolls, and what appeared to be some kind of mid-air, interpretive dance that communicated nothing except his overwhelming need for validation. Very nice, Jake said, applauding politely. Our pilots will be impressed. We use machines for that sort of thing, of course. Metal and engines. Much more efficient than biology. But I suppose you work with what you've got. Vex's landing was perhaps slightly less graceful than his takeoff, but he recovered quickly enough to pretend it was intentional. Krugg stepped forward next, his movement causing small seismic events in the immediate vicinity. Watch and learn, flesh bag, he rumbled, approaching what appeared to be a specially prepared demonstration area. Without ceremony, he walked directly into a concrete wall that had been constructed for this exact purpose. The wall lost. Concrete dust settled around Krugg like he was starring in his own personal action movie. He stood there, completely unharmed, looking like someone who had just proven that physics was optional when you had enough attitude. Crystalline skin structure, he explained, knocking on his arm with a sound like someone hammering on a boulder. Impact resistant, temperature resistant, wear resistant. I am a living fortress. Dr. Ruby Castellanos, Jake's chief medical officer, stepped forward with the kind of expression doctors get when they're about to explain why your symptoms don't match your self-diagnosis. That's remarkable. How do you handle flexibility? Joint movement? Circulation to extremities? Circulation is for weaklings, Krugg replied, though he seemed slightly less confident about this particular point. Finally, Dr. Quillsworth practically bounced to center stage, her tentacles writhing with the excitement of someone about to reveal the secret of life itself. And now, for the most incredible demonstration of all, she announced, producing what appeared to be a very sharp knife. Before anyone could object, she promptly sliced off one of her own tentacles. Several humans made involuntary sounds that suggested they were reconsidering their breakfast choices. The severed tentacle writhed on the ground like it was having second thoughts about the whole situation. Behold, Quillsworth exclaimed, apparently delighted by the looks of horror on human faces. Complete regenerative capability. Watch as I regrow what was lost. Indeed, her wound was already beginning to close, and what appeared to be the beginning of a new tentacle was starting to emerge. It was impressive, if you could get past the part where she had just casually performed surgery on herself like it was a party trick. Remarkable, Dr. Castellanos said, her medical training warring with her basic human instinct to suggest that maybe not cutting off body parts was a better life strategy. How long does complete regeneration take? Only 3 to 4 of your Earth weeks, Quillsworth replied proudly. Tech Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, Jake's chief engineer, raised his hand like he was in school. Question. What happens if you need that tentacle, right now? Like during those 3 to 4 weeks when it's growing back? Quillsworth's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Well, obviously one adapts, uses the remaining appendages, manages expectations. Right, Rodriguez said, nodding thoughtfully. We just use band-aids and try not to cut off important bits in the first place. Different approaches, I guess. Vex stepped forward again, his earlier showboating having apparently recharged his confidence levels to maximum. You see, humans, this is why the Council takes pity on your species. You are, as our scientists have classified you, squishy meatbags with delusions of adequacy. Soft, slow, weak, and tragically limited by your inferior evolutionary path. Jake's smile had evolved into something that would have made diplomats from 3 star systems nervous. How fortunate for us that you're willing to help us overcome these tragic limitations. I assume you have some sort of training program in mind? Dr. Quillsworth's tentacles did a little dance that suggested she had been waiting for exactly this question. Actually, yes. The Council has prepared the Trial of Biological Supremacy, a comprehensive testing program designed to demonstrate the advantages of proper evolutionary development. She activated a holographic display that materialized in the air like someone had just figured out how to make science fiction happen in real life. The display showed 3 different environments, each one looking like it had been designed by someone who clearly had strong opinions about what constituted a fair challenge. 3 trials, Quillsworth explained, her excitement making her tentacles wiggle in ways that suggested she might need to be sedated before she vibrated apart. Each designed to showcase the natural advantages of our respective species. The first environment looked like a wind tunnel that had gotten into an argument with a tornado and decided to settle their differences through violence. Massive air currents whipped through floating platforms suspended over what appeared to be a very long drop into nothing good. The aerial agility course, Vex announced with the smugness of someone who had just realized the game was rigged in his favor. Designed to test flight capabilities, aerial maneuvering, and adaptation to three-dimensional combat scenarios. The second environment appeared to be what would happen if someone asked a geology textbook to design an obstacle course while severely depressed. The massive stone barriers, crushing mechanisms, and what looked like a gauntlet of things specifically designed to break anything that wasn't made of rock. The Fortress Assault Trial, Krugg rumbled with satisfaction. Brute force, impact resistance, and the ability to literally punch through problems. My personal favorite. The third environment looked like it had been designed by a marine biologist who had watched too many action movies. Underwater sections, tight spaces, multiple simultaneous challenges requiring various appendages, and what appeared to be puzzles that needed solving while someone was actively trying to drown you. The adaptive complexity challenge, Quillsworth explained, her pride evident in every writhing tentacle. Multitasking, regenerative recovery, and the ability to literally regrow your way out of problems. Jake studied the displays with the expression of someone who was either very impressed or calculating the odds of survival. And I assume there's a course designed for our particular limitations? The three aliens exchanged glances that managed to be simultaneously pitying and condescending, which was honestly impressive given that two of them didn't have traditional faces. Well, Vex said, his tone suggesting he was about to deliver news about a beloved pet. We did prepare something appropriate for your species' capabilities. We call it the basic survival scenario. A fourth holographic environment appeared, and it looked like someone had designed a playground for particularly cautious toddlers. Gentle slopes, clearly marked paths, safety rails, and what appeared to be rest stops with refreshment stations. We didn't want to accidentally damage Earth's representative specimens, Quillsworth explained kindly. The Council would never forgive us if we broke the adorable little meat bags before you had a chance to contribute to galactic civilization. Rodriguez leaned over to Dr. Castellanos and whispered, "Are they serious right now?" "I think they actually are," she whispered back. "They genuinely believe they're being considerate." Jake stepped forward, his diplomatic smile having evolved into something that would have made poker players nervous. "How thoughtful of you to consider our safety. Of course, we accept your challenge." "Excellent," Quillsworth exclaimed, clapping tentacles together in what appeared to be applause. "When would you like to schedule the trials? We understand that primitive species often need time to prepare, gather courage, make peace with their gods, that sort of thing." "Oh, we're ready now," Jake replied casually. "No preparation necessary." The three aliens paused. This was clearly not the response they had been expecting. Vex's head tilted in a way that suggested his brain was trying to process information that didn't fit his worldview. "Now?" Krugg rumbled. "Without training? Without fear?" Dr. Castellanos stepped forward with the kind of smile that suggested she was looking forward to this considerably more than was probably healthy. "Fear's not really our thing. We're more of a figure-it-out-as-we-go species." Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. "Besides, how hard can it be? You guys make it look easy enough." The three aliens exchanged another glance, this one suggesting that something had just gone slightly off script, but they weren't sure what. "Very well," Vex announced, puffing out his chest again. "Let the trials begin. May the superior species prove their worth." Jake's grin was the kind that usually preceded either brilliant victories or spectacular disasters, and sometimes both simultaneously. Looking forward to it. The trials began with all the ceremony of a sporting event organized by beings who had clearly never heard of the concept of starting small and working your way up to the good stuff. Vex went first, naturally, launching himself into the aerial agility course with the confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved by having wings and an attitude. He soared through the initial obstacles with the grace of a predator who had just remembered he was apex, weaving between wind currents and navigating the floating platforms like he was performing an elaborate dance with physics itself. For about 30 seconds it was genuinely impressive. Then the course decided to introduce some variables that apparently hadn't been covered in Vex's flight school training. The wind currents began alternating between hurricane-force gusts and sudden dead zones, creating pressure differentials that turned his hollow bones from aerodynamic advantages into structural liabilities. The first time a sudden pressure change caught him off guard, Vex's hollow bones decided to demonstrate exactly why engineering involves trade-offs. What had been lightweight efficiency suddenly became painful flexibility in places that weren't supposed to be flexible. His triumphant aerial ballet quickly devolved into what looked like a feathered pinball ricocheting between obstacles. "Is he supposed to be making those sounds?" Rodriguez asked, wincing as Vex collided with another platform. "I don't think so," Dr. Castellanos replied, already pulling out her medical kit. Hollow bones are great for flight, but they're not so great when the flight doesn't go according to plan. Meanwhile, Krugg was discovering that the Fortress Assault trial had been designed by someone with a very specific sense of humor. The massive stone barriers were indeed perfect for someone with his particular skill set, and he plowed through them like a living siege engine, each impact sending chunks of masonry flying in directions that probably violated several safety regulations. The problem wasn't the obstacles he could punch through. The problem was the obstacles he couldn't fit around. The course had been designed with the assumption that brute force would always be the optimal solution. But whoever had designed it had apparently never met an engineer with a sense of irony. Narrow passages that required flexibility, tight spaces that needed to be navigated rather than destroyed, and time-sensitive challenges that required speed over strength quickly turned Krugg's confident assault into an exercise in discovering the limitations of being built like a biological formation. "He's stuck," Rodriguez observed, watching Krugg attempt to wedge himself through a passage that was clearly designed for beings who occasionally bent at the waist. "Thoroughly stuck," Dr. Castellanos agreed. "Rock-hard skin is great for protection, but it doesn't help much with yoga." Dr. Quillsworth was having her own educational experience in the adaptive complexity challenge. Her regenerative abilities were indeed remarkable, and her multiple tentacles gave her a significant advantage in the multitasking portions of the course. She attacked the challenge with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered that life was basically one big, exciting puzzle. Right up until the puzzle started fighting back in real time. The course demanded immediate responses to multiple simultaneous threats, and while her regenerative abilities were impressive, they weren't exactly instant. Each time she lost a tentacle to one of the course's more aggressive obstacles, she had to adapt to operating with fewer appendages while waiting for regeneration to kick in. It was like trying to solve a complex equation while someone kept erasing random parts of your work. "She's slowing down," Jake observed. "Banny's down." Watching Quillsworth struggle with a section that required 6 simultaneous actions while she was currently operating with only 4 functional tentacles. "Regeneration takes energy," Dr. Castellanos noted clinically, "and time, both of which appear to be in short supply." Then it was humanity's turn. Jake, Rodriguez, and Torrance. Dr. Castellanos approached their course with the casual confidence of people who had spent their entire evolutionary history being told they weren't specialized enough to be really good at anything, and had responded by becoming really good at everything. The basic survival scenario was indeed designed for beings who weren't particularly good at any one thing, which, as it turned out, was exactly what the situation called for. Where Vex had tried to power through with aerial superiority and been defeated by changing conditions, the humans adapted their approach in real time. When wind currents shifted, they didn't fight them, they used them. When platforms moved, they didn't try to overpower the movement, they worked with it. Rodriguez looked at a particularly challenging obstacle, and instead of trying to overcome it with specialized abilities, he simply found a way around it. "Huh," he said, rerouting power from one system to another with the casual expertise of someone who had spent his career making things work that weren't supposed to work. "That's not so bad." Dr. Castellanos encountered a section designed to test recovery from injury, and instead of relying on regeneration, she simply avoided getting injured in the first place. When that wasn't possible, she treated injuries efficiently and moved on, using medical knowledge and basic first aid instead of hoping her biology would fix the problem for her. "Interesting design," she commented, bandaging a minor cut while continuing to navigate the obstacle course. "They assume you're going to get hurt and just fix it later. We prefer not getting hurt in the first place." Jake coordinated their efforts with the kind of tactical thinking that comes from being a species that had to outthink everything else on their planet to survive. No specialized abilities, no overwhelming advantages, just intelligence, adaptability, and the kind of stubborn persistence that had carried humanity from caves to starships. They finished their course in record time. All three aliens stood in stunned silence, watching the scoreboards that showed humans not just succeeding, but excelling at challenges designed to be easy enough for their inferior biology. Something was clearly wrong with this picture, and none of them could figure out what. The silence stretched for so long that it began to develop its own gravitational field. Three representatives of galactic superiority stood staring at display screens that were apparently malfunctioning, because they showed impossible results that suggested the universe had gotten confused about who was supposed to be superior to whom. Dr. Castellanos, having finished treating the various injuries sustained by beings with supposedly superior biology, but finally broke the silence with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to people who should have already figured it out. "You know," she said, checking Vex's hollow bone fractures with professional efficiency, "I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding about what makes a species evolutionarily successful." Vex, his previous arrogance somewhat dampened by the fact that he was currently being held together by medical tape and human ingenuity, managed a weak protest. "But our specializations are clearly superior. Hollow bones for flight, regenerative capabilities, impenetrable defenses. Superior for very specific circumstances," Rodriguez interjected, having just finished jury-rigging a solution to extract Krugg from the passage where he'd gotten wedged. "But what happens when circumstances change? When your specialization becomes a liability instead of an advantage?" He gestured toward the alien trials, where three courses designed to showcase superior abilities had instead demonstrated the limitations of over-specialization. "Your hollow bones are great for flying, until you encounter pressure changes they can't handle. Krugg's rock-hard skin is perfect for defense, until he needs to bend or move quickly. And Doc Quill's regeneration is amazing, until she needs parts that haven't grown back yet." Dr. Quillsworth's remaining tentacles writhed with what appeared to be distress rather than excitement for the first time since they'd arrived. "But specialization is the key to evolutionary success. Focus on strengths, maximize advantages, become the best at something specific." Jake shook his head with the patient expression of someone explaining a concept that should have been obvious to anyone who had spent 5 minutes thinking about it. "That's not how evolution works. That's how artificial selection works. Evolution doesn't care about being the best at something specific. Evolution cares about being good enough at everything you need to survive." He gestured toward his team, three humans who represented nothing particularly special by galactic standards, and everything special about human survival strategy. "We're not the strongest, fastest, toughest, or most specialized. We're the most adaptable. We're good enough at everything to handle whatever gets thrown at us." Dr. Castellanos nodded, continuing her medical explanations while demonstrating exactly what she was talking about. "Human biology is specifically designed for versatility. We can run long distances, but we can also sprint when necessary. We can climb, swim, fight, solve problems, adapt to different climates, eat almost anything organic, and recover from injuries that would be fatal to more specialized species." "But surely," Vex protested weakly, his worldview crumbling faster than his hollow bones under pressure, "surely raw physical superiority must count for something?" Rodriguez laughed, not unkindly. "Physical superiority is great right up until you meet someone smarter than you, or more adaptable, or who's had more practice dealing with problems that can't be solved by being really good at one thing." The truth was starting to dawn on the three aliens like a very unwelcome sunrise. Krugg, finally extracted from his geological predicament, rumbled with the voice of someone who was beginning to suspect he had made some fundamental errors in judgment. "Your species," he said slowly. "You are not specialists." "Nope," Jake confirmed cheerfully. "We're generalists. We're the species that survived because we were good enough at everything to handle whatever our planet threw at us. Persistence predators who ran down prey that was faster and stronger than us. Tool users who solved problems that were too big for our bodies to handle. Social cooperators who worked together to overcome challenges that would have killed us individually." The implications were starting to sink in, and none of the aliens looked particularly happy about where this logic was leading. "Persistence predators," Vex repeated, his voice containing the kind of horror usually reserved for people who had just realized they were in a horror movie, and they weren't the protagonists. Dr. Castellanos smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just made a successful diagnosis. "Oh yes, we're the species that killed megafauna by following them around until they died of exhaustion. We're pursuit predators. We don't give up, we don't get tired, and we don't stop until we get what we're after. And what we're after, Rodriguez added helpfully, is usually whatever seems interesting at the time. New places to explore, new problems to solve, new challenges to overcome. We get bored easily, and bored humans tend to go looking for excitement. The three aliens exchanged glances that suggested they were all having the same terrible realization simultaneously. Your species, Dr. Quillsworth said faintly. You are not the primitive weaklings we assumed. Jake's grin was the kind that usually preceded either fantastic news or absolutely terrible news, depending on which side of it you were on. No, Doc, we're really not. The atmosphere in the reception center had undergone what could politely be called a complete reversal of expectations. Three representatives of galactic superiority sat in chairs that had been hastily reinforced to handle Krugg's geological proportions, while three humans stood around looking like people who had just realized they held all the cards in a game everyone else thought they were losing. The silence was broken by the sound of Vex's communicator, which had apparently been set to a priority frequency that suggested someone important was trying to reach him. He answered with the defeated tone of someone who was about to deliver news that nobody wanted to hear. Commander Thornbeak reporting, he said, his voice lacking the arrogant confidence that had characterized his earlier pronouncements. The evaluation of Sol 3 species has been completed. The voice that came through the communicator was sharp, authoritative, and clearly accustomed to receiving good news from subordinates who knew better than to disappoint. Excellent, Commander. I trust the primitive humans have been appropriately impressed by our superiority demonstration. When can we expect their formal application for probationary membership in the Galactic Council? Vex looked at Jake, who was leaning against a wall with the casual posture of someone who was enjoying this conversation considerably more than was probably diplomatic. Well, sir, there have been some unexpected developments. What kind of developments, Commander? The kind where we discovered that our assumptions about human capabilities were somewhat incomplete. The pause from the communicator was the kind that suggested someone was rapidly recalculating their understanding of the universe and not particularly enjoying the process. Explain. Jake stepped forward with the helpful expression of someone who was about to make a situation either much better or significantly worse. Maybe I can help with that explanation. Captain Jake Morrison, representing Earth in these proceedings. Human, the voice said, with the tone of someone identifying a particularly unpleasant species of insect. You will address me as High Counselor Zethrix of the Galactic Council. Sure thing, Zethrix, Jake replied with the cheerful informality of someone who had just decided that formal protocol was optional. I wanted to thank you for this opportunity to demonstrate our capabilities. It's been very educational. Your capabilities? The High Counselor's voice suggested that the concept of humans having capabilities was both novel and unwelcome. Commander Thornbeak, what exactly has occurred during this demonstration? Dr. Castellanos stepped forward with her medical report, speaking with the clinical precision of someone delivering a diagnosis. High Counselor, your representatives have sustained multiple injuries during their trials, while human participants completed all challenges without significant medical intervention. Based on our observations, your species specializations, while impressive in ideal conditions, become significant liabilities when environmental factors change. Liabilities? The voice from the communicator was starting to take on the quality of someone who was beginning to suspect that this conversation was not going to end well for anyone involved. Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. Oh yeah, major design flaws. Hollow bones are great until you hit turbulence. Rock-hard skin is perfect until you need to fit through a doorway. And regeneration is amazing until you need the parts you're regenerating right now instead of 3 weeks from now. The silence from the communicator stretched long enough for everyone present to contemplate the implications of what was being discussed. Dr. Quillsworth, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy, finally spoke up. High Counselor, I believe we may have made some fundamental errors in our assessment of human biology. They appear to be more capable than anticipated. More capable? The High Counselor's voice was beginning to show signs of strain. They are primitive meat bags from a backwater system. How capable could they possibly be? Jake's grin widened into something that would have made Diplomatic Corps from 3-star systems file formal complaints. Well, Zethrix, let me put it this way. We're the species that took a planet full of things that were bigger, stronger, faster, and more specialized than us, and we made ourselves the apex predators. We're persistence hunters who don't know when to quit, problem solvers who get bored easily, and social cooperators who really enjoy working together to overcome challenges. And Dr. Castellanos added helpfully, we reproduce fairly quickly and adapt to new environments with remarkable efficiency. We also have this interesting tendency to explore and colonize any territory that seems interesting or useful. The implications were sinking in like stones dropping into very deep water. High Counselor, Vex said quietly, I believe the humans may not require our protection or guidance as much as we initially assumed. In fact, Rodriguez added cheerfully, we were kind of hoping you might be interested in joining our protection network instead. Earth's been thinking about expanding our sphere of influence, and we could always use allies who know the local neighborhood. The pause from the communicator was the kind that suggested someone was having a very serious recalculation of their understanding of galactic power dynamics. Your protection network? The High Counselor asked faintly. Jake nodded with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a hobby that had gotten slightly out of hand. Oh yeah, we've got big plans, lots of interesting systems to explore, new challenges to tackle, problems to solve. We figure the galaxy's a pretty big place, and we're just getting started. And Dr. Castellanos added with clinical precision, our preliminary analysis suggests that most galactic species have overspecialized to the point where they're vulnerable to environmental changes, unexpected challenges, or contact with more adaptable life forms. You might want to consider updating your insurance policies. The sound that came from the communicator was the kind of noise that people make when they realize that the harmless-looking creature they'd been poking with a stick was actually a sleeping predator, and had just woken up. Commander Thornbeak, the High Counselor said carefully, return to base immediately. We need to convene an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Should I file the usual report recommending probationary membership for the primitive species? Vex asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Commander, the High Counselor replied with the weary voice of someone who had just realized that the universe had a very twisted sense of humor. I think it's time we started worrying about whether they're going to offer us probationary membership in their organization instead. Jake's laugh was the kind that suggested he was already looking forward to the next conversation. Welcome to Earth's neighborhood, folks. We think you're going to find it very interesting around here. The three aliens looked at each other with the expression of beings who had just realized they had accidentally invited the galaxy's apex predators to join their peaceful community, and those apex predators were already making plans for the housewarming party. Outside, Earth continued its rotation with the casual indifference of a planet that had spent billions of years producing life forms that refused to know when they were beaten, and was looking forward to seeing what they came up with next.